I think the biggest thing is don't go into a startup with the intention to make a lot of money. I think that was something that I did early on. I thought, hey, if I could get an equity stake in a company, that's going to be worth tons. And so um, you can make money in startups. You can make money in a lot of different ways. But if you go into it with the express intention of I'm going into startup land to be rich, you may end up disappointed. More startups fail than succeed. And that's just it's a tough world.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Chris Riley. And Chris started his journey doing both sports and band during high school. Afterwards, went off to West Point, wanted to fly helicopters. In the meantime, got or met and married his wife and transferred to BYU. Still wanted to fly helicopters, but they ended up, I think, finding a cyst on his head, so that kind of limited his ability to continue to pursue flying and within helicopters. So had a degree and also at that time had a degree in I think political science. So a little bit limited on the options as far as a career. So went out looked for a job. Went into doing or went to a startup doing sales and then customer service. Moved over to another company and worked for a period of time. Also got an MBA, and then afterwards started a consulting with a company doing customer success. 6 months after that, got promoted full time. That company got acquired and decided to go out and do his own thing. The company failed as no one was or was wanting the product at the time. And then after that, working for another business now, doing some consulting as well as pursuing a couple startups as well, or consulting for at least a couple startups. So, with that much as a introduction, welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Well, excited to have you on. So, well, I just gave a quick run through to a longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that a bit? So tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in high school doing sports and band.
Yeah, so I think, as interesting as I was kind of an outlier in all the groups that I was in because I couldn't just focus on one. You typically would have, I mentioned the band in the high school and football because most of the time you'd have football players and you have band members. You didn't have very much crossover. In fact, there was a time I was the drum major in our marching band playing football, and so I had to take off my shoulder pads and put on my drum major uniform to conduct during the halftime show. So I kind of missed the halftime speech. So I was always that kid who just wanted to do everything. I didn't want it to be kind of constrained into to one area or another. So that's kind of how I started and how I've been really throughout my entire life. I am unashamed generalist. I just like to be have my hands in all sorts of different things.
So you did that high school. Sounds like enjoyed pursuing multiple paths and wearing different hats. And I think afterwards you went off to West Point, kind of wanted to get into flying helicopters or kind of going down that route. So maybe walk us through how or that aspect of the journey.
Yeah, so I mean my goal was, to be an army officer full time. Flying helicopters was something that I originally wanted to go into the Air Force and fly jets, and then I was around helicopters one time for some recruiting event, and I was like, this is so cool. I want to be a part of aviation in any way I can. And coming from rural Utah, I was trying to get into the Air Force Academy. I didn't make it in because it's way more competitive to get into the Air Force Academy than West Point from Utah because it's right next door in Colorado. So I applied for West Point, got in, and went there for a year. And fun fact about West Point is that you cannot be married while you're there. And so I I met my wife, and she kind of expressed that she wasn't going to wait for 4 years for me to finish my degree. And so I said, I don't want to lose you. So I transferred to BYU and to finish out my degree, much to the chagrin of everybody. You have to go through four different exit interviews in order
Mhm.
to leave West Point if you're in good academic and leadership standing, which I was. And so each one was like, wait, you want to leave to get married? Like you're leaving this for a girl? You're nuts. And I I what I yeah, a little bit I was. But that was my choice. And at the end of the day, ROTC, which I could pursue at BYU while being married, ends up with the same commission. So I was planning to end up in the same place anyway. So to me, it didn't make that much of a difference whether I stayed at West Point or moved to BYU.
Hmm. So now
Yeah.
you go through that, move over to BYU, and then I think you were studying a political science degree and continuing on to pursue the flight or flying helicopters path, and then had a bit of a medical issue or something pop up that kind of shifted that direction a bit.
Yeah, so it was my own fault. So I did a lot of boxing in college, and I ended up with a concussion. And when you get a concussion, you have to go through a flight physical in order to be a pilot, and they do a very extensive workup on. So I had several MRIs, CAT scans, and they found this benign cyst in my brain, which prevents me from being a pilot in the military, but really doesn't affect me in any other way. So, um, as since my whole life goal was to be an Army officer, and the requirement for being an Army officer is you have to get a degree. It doesn't specify what type of degree. I went the political science route because it had fewer credit hours and was in something I was vaguely interested in, and it kind of appealed to my strengths of writing and communication. So I went for a political science degree, not thinking that I would ever need to use it. And so when we discovered that the cyst, I kind of had to backpedal. I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I didn't get a harder engineering degree or computer science degree or something that I knew there was a career path right out of college. And this was we were just recovering from the recession. So this 2013 was when I graduated. So there just weren't a lot of jobs out there. And so particularly for somebody with a useless political science degree. So yeah, I had to kind of figure that out. I knew I didn't want to do anything else in the military full time, and so I joined the Army Reserve, did that part time, and then started leaning on my one computer science class. So I took one computer science class in college. I was pretty good at it, and so I joined a small company. I was maybe the employee number five, six of a company called Elite IT, doing phone sales, and then I started their first customer support department. So taking inbound requests, helping people with their computers. That was doing tech support. That's how I kind of got my start in the world of software and computers.
Now you get into softwares, get into computers, kind of focusing on the sales aspect, and so, to a degree, if you have limited as far as what the degree offers and you have an opportunity to go in that direction, it sounds like it worked out well in the long run. So you go into that and you do, or now overall kind of what period you or did you do, or were you in that position, and then kind of where did your journey evolve from there?
Yeah, so I stayed there for about a year and a half, and then I got an opportunity to work as a technical project manager for a market research company. More on the project management operations. I used PHP and did some basic programming, scripting. And during that time, I also was going back to school and getting my MBA online. And so looking to kind of broaden my horizons. And I also started freelancing. So I started a freelance business doing business consulting. And so all of that all happened within the space of about 2 years. And then I started freelance consulting for a company called Evolution Labs. And this was a very, very early stage education technology startup. And so was their customer success. I was running kind of some of their customer success for certain clients. And then after about 6 months, they were looking to move on from their current VP of customer success and find somebody else. And so they offered me a job full time, which made me full-time employee of that company. I was full-time employee number five of that company. Um, and so joined them full time. And yeah, that was my first really software company. Up until that point, I had been kind of tangentially around IT and computers, but this was my first software company. And so I joined there to run their customer success department. And that's when I got into product management, started understanding sales support and operations, and really broadened my horizons.
No, makes sense. So kind of, natural evolution, extension of what you're doing, provide some kind of additional opportunity now. I can't remember, was it during that time or after it you started to, or you went or back and pursued an MBA degree and started getting into consulting? So maybe kind of walk us through how that aspect evolved of the journey.
Yeah, so that happened while I was as a technical project manager. So had I realized that when I got into technical project management, I realized that wasn't the direction that I wanted to go. I wanted to go into more corporate leadership so an MBA felt like the right fit. So I was doing that part time while I was the technical project manager, and then once I graduated with my MBA, that's when I started consulting part time.
Hmm. So now was the intent with the MBA is, hey, I want to switch jobs, switch careers, or is it more just or increasing your skill or your marketability, or kind of what was the genesis or the desire to on going after the MBA as you're doing that while also working full time?
Yeah, it was really to increase my marketability, to increase my options. I considered for a little time actually starting my own consultancy, my own business consultancy. Um, and but I found very quickly from the first couple of clients that I had that I just didn't have the experience, the background in business to really understand everything that I knew about business was from a theoretical standpoint from my MBA and not from a practical standpoint. So I struggled a little bit with consultancy early on, but that's what led me to this other role with Evolution Labs.
So now is that and correct me if I'm wrong, because you mentioned, or when we chatted a bit before, you had the company that failed, or you couldn't get people convinced of the product or the service you're offering. Is that in relation to that, or was that a different aspect of the journey?
No, that was a different aspect of the journey. A couple of I was a freelancer, couple of clients, paying clients, but nothing significant until and then the startup that that failed was actually after about 5 years after that.
Okay, gotcha. So now, what always a little bit revisiting failures, pouring a bit of salt in the wound, so to speak. So without pouring too much salt in the wound, kind of what was the genesis? Was it just not a good product market fit? Was it not doing enough diligence in the marketplace, or not matching the too costly or unwanted, or kind of what was the how did things get started? Kind of what was the backstory bit there, just on kind of how that ended up evolving, or not, or not, or not deciding not to continue to pursue it.
Yeah, so so to back up a little bit. So with Evolution Labs, eventually became the chief operating officer, got an equity stake in the company, was the chief operating officer when it was acquired. And so went into this other larger company, and transferred all of our business processes and went through this whole acquisition process. Got got an from my equity stake, got some cash, and so I was pretty confident. I had some cash in the bank. I had just successfully helped sell a business. I thought I knew exactly what I was doing. So I went on Angel List and was looking around for a technical founder uh, to kind of go for round two. And so I partnered with a guy, fantastic developer, um, great engineer. He's actually started another company that I'm consulting for now that I'm on the board of advisors called Strat Rocket. But we wanted to get into the HR tech space. So we felt like HR was broken, and we the biggest issue that we saw was that there was a disconnect between what people could do and what they wanted to do, and what employers were seeing in these prospects through their resume, their cover letter. There was just a very outdated system. We felt that there's so much more about what a good employee is than what you can distill in a resume or a LinkedIn profile. And so we started Skillbank with the intention of kind of building in this this series of tests and assessments that would help to kind of show a more holistic view of what a person is and their competencies in for potential employers. And so what went wrong? Well, there's actually a couple of things. Right off the bat, we found out that HR is a very not only is it a very competitive space, but HR is typically a cost center of a business and not a revenue generating center of a business. So when you have like a software that is sales enablement, uh, you know, sales teams, CEOs are all about, throwing money at the sales team because it brings in more top line revenue. Whereas for an HR, that's they see that as a cost center. It's you're not generating revenue. You can't directly tie, anything in the HR world to revenue. It's all indirect. And so we just found really strong headwinds right off the bat. We had a couple of early conversations with people who thought that this was a great idea. It was going to work great. We partnered with a couple of early beta testers, and that's when we discovered our second biggest headwind, which is that what we were actually doing was introducing friction in this application process, and the HR leaders didn't want friction in this application process. That's why you've seen, Indeed or LinkedIn has the easy apply button now. Like the whole the whole HR landscape was about reducing friction. I think they went a little bit too far. Now you have 1,000 applicants for every job. Um, but they didn't want to introduce friction. And we were talking about having a series of tests and a series of assessments, um, which introduced friction into their application pipeline. And that just didn't work for a lot of HR leaders. And so with this was all bootstrapped, it was all self-funded, and ultimately what ended up happening is we just we couldn't find product market fit. Not only were HR leaders not interested in adding friction to their pipeline, they also didn't have budget to pay us even if they did. So there
Hmm.
was after about 9 months or so, we kind of closed up shop and moved on. We ran out of cash, couldn't uh, weren't successful in fundraising, mostly because we didn't have customers. So that's another lesson that we learned. Like most investors want to see proof that you've got market traction before they're willing to jump in. Even if you have a great idea, it has to be proved out. So yeah, I mean it was a good learning experience. But I think it really speaks to, we had all of this momentum because we had this great idea in our own minds. And then we ran around and we talked to a lot of people in the industry, and they also thought it was a great idea. And everybody that we talked to said, yeah, this is a problem. This is a good potential solution. But what we learned the hard way is that there's a difference between something that people think is a good potential solution and something that people are willing to pay for. And there's a very big distinction between those two things. And yeah, learned that the hard way. And so that's one of the biggest lessons I take away from that period of time is that you can't just get to a solution that people think will work. You have to get to a solution that people will pay for, that
Hmm.
solves a problem that people will pay for.
Gotcha. So it sounds like, sometimes you get to learn a little bit from the school of hard knocks, or even if you're, potentially have a solution to a problem or some way to improve it, doesn't always mean people are willing to pay for it, or it's necessarily successful in the marketplace, as far as acceptance. So you encountered that, worked or tried a few paths, couldn't get the traction. So kind of coming off of that, I don't know, a failure. I guess I'll call it a failure in the sense of business failed, but not necessarily you as an individual failed. But so now you're coming off of that and picking things back up, and kind of how did you decide where you're going to go from there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is that I really enjoyed product management. So I really enjoy working with engineering teams, figuring out solutions to customer problems and building those solutions. And um, so that's kind of what I have gravitated to as my full-time gig. I still love startups. And so I am on the board of advisors for two different software startups. But my full-time day job is as a, senior manager of product management at a company called WeVideo. Fairly small company. We do online video editing, and it's very I love it. I love being able to work with a small team, but an established team, and kind of refine that product.
No, makes perfect sense. So so now you go in that direction, you come off the failure, said, okay, go and join another team and kind of go in that direction while still at maybe a lower level, continuing to pursue the startups and small businesses. Now, sometimes you do that out of the sense of, hey, I got into a startup, found that I didn't love it, or I wanted to be more of a team, or I didn't have desire, the skill set, the drive, whatever it might be, to do my own business. And so never going to go back again. And other times you say, okay, I'll go join a team or otherwise go in a different direction while at the heart still wanting to or anticipating at some point re-engaging back on the startup front. So kind of if you're to now look out into a bit of the future, near-term future, 6 to 12 months, kind of where do you see things headed or kind of what's next or in store for you?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunity right now. We are going through another, revolution with AI. And there's there's a lot of opportunity to solve problems that couldn't be solved with technology before. And so I'm exploring several different areas where I think that technology can come and help some established industries, particularly in that have been traditionally kind of word of mouth service based. So if you're thinking about like a handyman service or like a pool cleaning or house cleaning, some of these more painters, contractors, those businesses that traditionally have been a little bit technology adverse. Technology hasn't been able to help them. So I'm exploring several different options there. So next 6 to 12 months, we'll see what happens. I'm not gonna commit to anything, but there are a lot of opportunities, and AI is really opening doors that were previously shut, and it's an exciting thing.
Makes perfect sense. Sounds like a good direction. Still opportunities to come, and maybe a startup or yet in your future. So it sounds like some good opportunities yet ahead. Well, with that, now as we've kind of reached the present day of the journey and even looking a bit to where things may be headed, great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what'd you learn from it?
Yeah, so when we were when I was the chief operating officer of Evolution Labs, we had a very strong product called Suite 360, which is a K through 12 social emotional learning platform. And we got a little bit of market interest for a similar program for fraternities and sororities in universities. And so we spent, I want to say, 6 to 8 months developing a product based on this market interest. Took took away our focus from our core product and spent all this time investing in this separate product. And ultimately we got two customers, the two customers that had expressed interest, no market traction, and it never really got off the ground. The end users didn't love it. There was just not, it was basically a massive waste of time and energy. And I think that was the worst business mistake that we made, was taking our focus off of what was actually working and chasing the dollars. That's something that early stage startups do, but at some point, when you know it's working, you need to dig into what's working and not just chase every sale that you could possibly have. You have to start understanding who your customer is, who you want your customer to be, and dig in. So that was the biggest, I felt like a massive wasted opportunity of 6 to 8 months of development time for something that was not our core focus.
No, and and that one's kind of hard as a startup. It's always easy hindsight 2020 to look back and said, hey, we should have just put our focus here, or we should have just pursued this, given opportunity, and makes sense looking back in retrospect. And at the time, you're trying to, a lot of times as a startup, still figuring out what the company is exactly, and sometimes you're saying, hey, there's so many great opportunities, there's so many features, and this will make the difference, or this will set us apart. And so, it's one of those that hindsight is always 2020, but it's always easy to make the mistake as you're going through it. So definitely is an understandable mistake to make, but a good one to learn from.
Yeah. It
Second
could have,
question now that, oh, go ahead.
yeah, it could have easily been the other way. That's the thing. That's the interesting thing about startups is it could have gone the other way. That could have been $1 million business. We don't know. But yeah, it was a mistake in hindsight.
Well, definitely at least a good one to learn from. So it certainly sounds like it worked out overall. Second question now that I like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what's the one rule of thumb that you'd recommend?
So I think the biggest thing is don't go into a startup with the intention to make a lot of money. I think that was something that I did early on. I thought, hey, if I could get an equity stake in a company, that's going to be worth tons. And so um, you can make money in startups. You can make money in a lot of different ways. But if you go into it with the express intention of I'm going into startup land to be rich, you may end up disappointed. More startups fail than succeed. And that's just it's a tough world. I would say go in because you want to experience different aspects of the build of a business that you haven't been able to experience. If you're sales and you want to understand, product or marketing and other things, if you're an engineer and you want to understand sales, learn how to build things. There's so much in building a startup that is beneficial besides, the potential millions of dollars that you can make if your company becomes successful and sells. So I would say focus on the journey and not on the destination, which is for many people making a lot of money.
No, sounds like a great rule of thumb and a great takeaway. So, well, with that, now as we have reached the end of the interview, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be a employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above. What's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah. So I mean, the best way is connect on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. You can send me a message, follow. I post content on LinkedIn all the time. Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn, message me there. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again, Chris, for coming on the podcast. It's been a fun, it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, help us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, Chris, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you.